I think the one we really wanted to get to was PNG time.
What is PNG time?
So what is PNG time? I mean, so like the basic layman definition I think everybody knows of without getting into it is that like basically there's this common understanding in Papua New Guinea. I don't know about other Melanesian societies, but
it may even be like a Melanesian.
May even be a Melanesian thing, yeah. But in Papua New Guinea especially, whenever you hear PNG time, I mean it's still the word PNG time. That implies that people are gonna be late. people are so laid and laid back to accomplish tasks to the point where it's actually a culturally accepted thing, and it even has a name for it. And it's not like Sipik time or Highlands time or Hula time or what. And you realize it's like PNG time. The whole country seems to have this problem for some reason. Where it's like,
I wouldn't say acceptance. It's more like a tolerance.
Tolerance of
people
this.
Just.
Yeah, and in the context of a modern society that goes by the clock and stuff like that, yes, it is a huge issue, more or less.
Do you think when you say why did it come about, like when did it come about?
So I was asking this neighbor of mine,
gentleman,
like why he thought it came about, and I even asked one of our mutual friends too, and he actually said something similar. So like, I mean, in a way it kind of reinforces, and I guess it makes sense to me. So if you think about the way PNG is as a nation, well, PNG is a country. We're a third world country, but then are people starving in Papua New Guinea? Like, are people dying?
What is a third world country?
I mean, countries that don't hit a certain GDP per capita or something like that, their population.
Okay.
And then you don't have a lot of infrastructure development and stuff like that in place. So where in terms of economic development and all of these like markers or whatever, where we're not high up there, we're like low and 200 or something like that out of a country of 200 and something. So we are, by the standard metrics, definitely fall under the category of
by the defined metrics.
Yeah. So I can't off the top of my head. Maybe I'll put some figures here, but anyway, that's not the point of this. The point I'm trying to make is PNG is regarded as a third world country, but we're put alongside other third world countries where people are starving for food.
Right.
These metrics are not fully accurate because they doesn't actually represent
the quality of life
in PNG. We have people living in rural areas who are obese.
Sure.
That's a thing that happens for me. People here are not starving to death. Versus there are countries that are also considered third world countries where people are starving to death.
Right.
So there is a disparity there. And I think I'm trying to circle back to this PNG. How this circles back to PNG time is
why
in
PNG
a sense
time?
Is that our people here have things in abundance, and also time and like dates and calendars and all these things. These are things that was introduced to our people in the last 200 years or something like that. But prior to this, our people were already living, and they were living in abundance. They were living well. Our people were relatively well off. Our people were not, even when they were still living without modern technology and stuff like that, our ancestors were not necessarily struggling to get by. They had their problem with diseases like malaria and stuff like that. Like we did have problems here, but in terms of food and stuff like that, our people had things in abundance. So
wealthy.
Our people were wealthy.
Yeah.
We had our own version of traditional wealth.
Yeah.
And when you have wealth, when you're not wealthy, time becomes an important thing to track and manage because you're trying to do things to acquire wealth. Your time becomes more important to you. So if you're living in a desert, or if you're living in something like that, or if you live in a part of the world where they have the 4 seasons, then you have to plot out your planting and stuff like that. Time becomes important. Time in a sense of what season is it, but also time in the sense of what time of day is it.
Mm-hmm.
Time becomes important when you have scarcity. Mm-hmm. But when you have abundance, time is less important. So our ancestors had a relatively abundant life. And as such, time was not so much of an important thing to them. So they didn't necessarily keep track of it. I mean, obviously they kept track of it, but it wasn't as much of an importance to them. So in recent times when, white people have come along and introduced, during the colonial times, they tried to introduce calendars and times and stuff like that. Yeah, they've introduced, the urban lifestyle, and in the urban setting, yes, time is important, and individuals like Allan and I who live in an urban setting will be negatively affected by PNG time. But people living in the village are eating well, they're sleeping well, they do have their problems. Again, like I said, you have diseases and stuff like that going on. That's still a problem. We do have problems. But there's certain things that you won't say PNG is struggling for. We have in an abundance, resources and stuff like that. And as such, time, at least in the traditional times, was not so important. And so it's kind of this thing that has been there, and it wasn't ingrained in our ancestors to take it as seriously. And that's sort of that cultural thing. I feel like that behavior has been passed along. And the modern manifestation of that mentality is this lack of, our people were not sort of culturally taught. It isn't ingrained in our society culturally to be time conscious and stuff like that. And then we even have this accepted thing across the country of PNG time, because our culture is just the culture is a reflection of the environment that our people lived in, right? They developed that culture as a response to it, and so they had PNG time. PNG time is just a modern name we've given to this mentality that our people have. And I think it will have to change in the modern setting going forward. But I guess that's sort of my long explanation of the origin of it and why it exists. And yeah, so that's kind of it.
Interesting.